The day was flawless. The sun was softly touching the tops of the pine trees surrounding the small church in the suburbs of Portland, Maine. The fall sky, deep and fathomless, seemed to bless the union of two people who had decided to tie their fates together. Zoe Carter stood in front of the mirror in the small bride's room. Her 30-year-old face glowed with happiness, but there was a shadow lurking in the depths of her brown eyes, an elusive shadow, almost invisible to outsiders. She carefully adjusted the lace at the hem of her snow-white dress, which flowed in soft waves to the floor, emphasizing the gracefulness of her figure. "Are you ready to be Mrs. Smith?" asked her friend Rachel, who was helping with the finishing touches. Zoe took a deep breath. Yes, her voice trembled, but only for a moment. More than it ever had. She ran a hand through her sleek dark hair, gathered into an elegant style. Then she pulled a small box out of her purse and opened it. Inside was a silver necklace with a tiny key-shaped pendant. "What is it?" Rachel asked. "It was a gift from Noah," Zoe said, putting the jewelry around her neck. "He said I was the key to his happiness." Rachel helped to fasten the lock. "He's right. You are made for each other. If you only knew." Zoe's mind raced, but she only smiled, pushing the troubling thoughts away. Today was her wedding day, and the past should stay in the past, forever. The guests had already gathered in the church, few in number, but the closest to her. Noah Smith, the 35-year-old groom, nervously tugged on the sleeves of his dark blue suit. Next to him stood Lucas Green, best friend and witness at the wedding. "Stop fidgeting," Lucas whispered, discreetly adjusting Noah's bow tie. "You're like a high school kid on a first date." "I'm only getting married for the second time in my life. I have a right to be nervous," Noah countered with a wry smile. The church door opened, and the organist played the wedding march. Noah's heart sank when he saw his bride walking down the aisle. Zoe's dark chocolate skin contrasted with the whiteness of her dress, making her look like a vision from a dream. "God," Noah whispered. "She's beautiful." Lucas nodded silently, not taking his eyes off his bridesmaid, Rachel, who was walking just behind Zoe in a lavender-colored dress. The ceremony was short, but moving. The priest spoke of fidelity, love, and understanding, the foundation on which a strong marriage was built. Zoe and Noah exchanged vows, and when it was time to place the ring on the bride's finger, Noah hesitated for a second, his hands trembling so much. "I promise to love and cherish you, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty," he said, looking into the eyes of his bride. "Until the end of our days." Zoe felt a lump rise to her throat. At that moment, she almost believed that her secret would never come to the surface, that they would really live together for the rest of their lives. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest solemnly proclaimed. "You may kiss the bride." Noah gently embraced Zoe and kissed her to the joyous applause of the guests. None of them noticed the female figure slipping into the far corner of the church moments before the ceremony ended. Tamara Woods stood in the shadow of a column, watching the happy newlyweds. Her dark eyes were full of cold determination. Her 29-year-old face showed no emotion, only her lips were tightly pressed together, betraying her inner tension. She waited until the newlyweds were walking toward the exit to the sound of music and quietly followed the crowd. The festive dinner was organized in a small restaurant on the shore of the lake. The autumn air was filled with the scents of withering leaves and salt water. The tables covered with snow-white tablecloths were decorated with bouquets of pale pink roses and fragrant jasmine. The guests took their seats, and the evening was filled with clinking glasses, laughter, and congratulations. Detective Ashley Johnson, a 45-year-old woman with a penetrating gaze and short-cropped graying hair, sat at the far table. She was Noah's cousin and, despite being busy with the police department, couldn't miss an event like this. "To Noah and Zoe," Lucas proclaimed, raising his champagne glass. "To their happiness, love, and understanding." The guests joined in the toast. Noah put his arm around his wife's shoulders and kissed her on the temple. "Thank you all for sharing this special day with us," he said, looking around at the crowd. "I especially want to thank Lucas, who has put up with me as his best friend for 15 years. There was a round of laughter. Lucas bowed theatrically. Thanks also to my cousin Ashley, who took time out of her busy schedule of catching criminals to be with us tonight. Ashley raised her glass in gratitude. Her gaze lingered on Zoe for a moment. Her professional habit of noticing details kept her from relaxing, even at a family party. Something about her brother's fiancée seemed elusive. Not that it was suspicious, just unusual. But Ashley quickly dismissed those thoughts. Today was not the time for work-related musings. Zoe felt on edge. The presence of a police detective, even if it was a relative of her husband's, made her nervous. She excused herself and went to the ladies' room to catch her breath a little. Left to herself, Zoe lowered her hands to the cool marble of the sink and looked at her reflection. Everything was flawless. The makeup, the hair, the dress. No one would have thought that 10 years ago she was a completely different person, with a different name, a different body, a different life. The past is in the past, she reminded herself again. Zoe had spent several years carefully erasing all traces of her former identity. A new city, new papers, a new job, and now, a new family. No one knew her secret except her parents, who had long ago moved to California and preferred not to keep in contact with their only child, and a few people from her past life. People like Tamara Woods. At the thought of Tamara, Zoe shuddered. They hadn't seen each other in 7 years. Not since... No, not today. Today was the wedding day, and everything had to be perfect. Taking a deep breath, Zoe fixed her makeup and turned back to her guests. Noah looked at her worriedly. "Is everything okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," she lied, smiling. "I'm just worried." He squeezed her hand gently under the table. "There's no reason to worry. We're together now." Outside the restaurant window, the sky was gradually darkening, heralding the arrival of evening. Tamara Woods stood in the parking lot, watching the festivities through the large panoramic windows. She saw Zoe and Noah dancing their first dance as husband and wife, laughing as they accepted congratulations, Noah kissing his newlywed wife tenderly. Tamara pulled out her phone and snapped a few pictures. "You thought you could just disappear and start a new life," she whispered. "But some debts need to be repaid." The evening continued. After dancing and cake, it was time for the traditional photo shoot. The photographer arranged the guests in groups, trying to capture this happy day from all angles. "And now the bride and her bridesmaids," he commanded. Zoe stood in the center, surrounded by Rachel and 2 other friends. They smiled as they posed for the camera. "Great! Now the groom and his friends." Noah took a seat next to Lucas and his co-workers at the machine shop. "Perfect!" exclaimed the photographer. "And now all together for a big family photo." The guests lined up around the newlyweds. Zoe noticed that Ashley Johnson took a seat a little aside, as if she didn't want to be the center of attention. Professional habit of staying in the shadows, Zoe thought. "Smile. 1, 2, 3. The photographer took a series of shots. When the official part of the photo shoot was over, the guests dispersed around the restaurant. Many went out on the terrace to admire the sunset over the lake. Zoe was alone at the buffet table for a moment, filling her glass with champagne. "Congratulations," came a quiet voice behind her. Zoe flinched and almost dropped her glass. She turned around slowly and saw her. Tamara Woods. 7 years hadn't changed her. The same penetrating eyes, the same well-defined lips, except her hair was shorter. "Tamara?" Zoe whispered, turning pale. "What are you doing here?" "How could I miss such an event?" she replied with a cold smile. "The wedding of an old friend." Zoe looked around, making sure no one was paying attention. "Listen," she said, lowering her voice. "I don't know what you want, but please go. Today is my day." Tamara took a sip from her glass. "Your day based on a lie. I wonder if your husband knows who you used to be." Zoe felt a chill run down her spine. "It's in the past. I've changed." "Oh, you certainly have." Tamara gave her an appraising look. "On the outside, you're different. But on the inside, people don't change, Zoe. Or should I call you—" "Don't say that name." Zoe cut her off abruptly. "Never." "Whatever you say." Tamara took a step back. "But we're not done talking. We have some unfinished business. With those words, she turned and disappeared among the guests, leaving Zoe with a racing heart. Suddenly, the festive hum of voices became unbearable and the air too thick to breathe. "There you are." Noah appeared beside her, putting his arm around her waist. "Our driver has arrived. Ready to go on your honeymoon, Mrs. Smith?" Zoe forced herself to smile, trying not to let her emotions show. "Of course," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss her husband. "I can't wait." The guests lined up in 2 rows, forming a lively corridor from the restaurant to the decorated car. The newlyweds ran through it in a hail of rice grains and rose petals. Zoe laughed as she held her husband's hand, but anxiety grew inside her. They got into the car, and Noah winked at her, starting the engine. "Are you ready for a new life?" Zoe squeezed his hand tightly. "Yeah, more than anything." The car sped off to the cheers of the attendants. None of them noticed the lone figure of Tamra Woods standing a little farther away with a cell phone in her hand. "Have a nice honeymoon," she thought as she watched the lights of the wedding car recede. "Enjoy it while you can." The coastal town of Bar Harbor greeted the newlyweds with a gentle October sun. Narrow streets drenched in fall foliage, old houses with tile roofs and breathtaking views of the Atlantic Ocean created the perfect honeymoon atmosphere. The small hotel where Zoe and Noah were staying was perched on a rocky shore, and their room had a stunning view of the vast sea. "I can't believe we're here," Zoe said, standing at the window and watching the seagulls circling the waves. Noah came up behind her and put his arm around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Believe me, you're Mrs. Smith now, and this is our honeymoon." He kissed her neck gently, causing Zoe to shiver slightly. She turned to him and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I'm so happy, Noah," she whispered. "Sometimes I don't think I deserve to be this happy." "Hey," he took her face in his palms. "Don't say that. You deserve all the best, and I'll do anything to make you happy." Their lips met in a long, sensual kiss. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to slip toward the horizon, coloring the room in orange and gold tones. The next few days flew by like a fairy tale. They explored the picturesque surroundings, walked through Acadia National Park, enjoyed the local cuisine in cozy restaurants, and spent long hours just talking and loving each other. On their 3rd day in Bar Harbor, they decided to take a boat trip. The rented boat glided smoothly on the calm smoothness of Frenchman Bay. Noah stood at the helm, and Zoe perched on the bow of the boat, her face in the sunlight and salt spray. "It's good for you to be captain," she shouted, laughing. "And it suits you to be my wife," he replied, keeping his eyes on her. A group of dolphins appeared in the distance. The animals playfully jumped out of the water, accompanying the boat. "Look!" Zoe exclaimed, pointing at them. "Aren't they beautiful?" Noah turned off the engine and they drifted for a while, watching the graceful mammals. At that moment, Noah's cell phone, left on the dashboard, vibrated, announcing a message. "Check to see who's there," Noah asked, not wanting to take his eyes off the wheel. Zoe reached for the phone. "It's Lucas," she said, glancing at the screen. "He wants to know how our trip is going." "Tell him we're in heaven," Noah smiled. That evening, as Zoe was showering after a long day outdoors, Noah's phone beeped again. He was lying on his bed, leafing through a neighborhood guide. Picking up the phone, Noah frowned. The sender's number was unfamiliar to him. Opening the message, he felt a chill run down his spine. "Your perfect wife is not who she says she is." Noah reread the text several times, trying to figure out what it meant and who could have sent such a message. His first thought was to reply and demand an explanation, but he held back. It was probably someone's stupid joke or a message sent by mistake. He put the phone away when he heard Zoe turn off the water in the shower. She came out a minute later, wrapped in a fluffy white robe, with damp hair falling to her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his tense expression. Noah hesitated for only a second. He didn't want to spoil their perfect honeymoon with some strange message. "Just figuring out the route for tomorrow," he lied, smiling. "How about a trip to the Bass Harbor Lighthouse? They say it's got an amazing view." Zoe sat down next to him on the bed and took his hand. "Sounds wonderful," she said, but then she looked him carefully in the eye. "Are you sure you're okay?" "Of course." Noah pulled her to him and kissed her forehead. "I'm just a little tired after the boat ride. This fresh air is exhausting." Zoe seemed satisfied with the answer. She began brushing her hair, and Noah glanced surreptitiously at the phone screen once more. The message was still there, like a thorn in his side. At night, Noah couldn't sleep for a long time. Zoe slept peacefully beside him, but his thoughts revolved around the strange message. What could not who she said she was mean? Does Zoe have some kind of secret? Could someone be trying to break them up? The next morning, as they ate breakfast on the hotel terrace overlooking the ocean, Noah couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He caught himself watching his wife surreptitiously, looking for some sign of what? "It's beautiful weather for a trip to the lighthouse today," Zoe said, spreading jam on her toast. "Why don't we take the sandwiches with us and have a picnic?" "That's a great idea," Noah said, trying to keep his voice normal. Zoe gave him an attentive look. "You've been weird this morning. Something wrong?" "No, just not enough caffeine in my blood," he joked, picking up his coffee cup. "We'll fix that." Not wanting to spoil the mood, Zoe didn't insist, but Noah could see a shadow of worry running across her face. The trip to the Bass Harbor Lighthouse had been one of the most memorable moments of their honeymoon. The white lighthouse, standing on granite cliffs, rose majestically above the raging waves of the Atlantic. They spent a long time wandering around the neighborhood, taking pictures and enjoying the views. Toward evening, as the sun began to slip toward the horizon, Zoe suggested they take selfies against the sunset. "Come on, it would be the perfect way to end the day," she said, snuggling up to her husband. Noah put his arm around her, and they smiled together into the camera phone. The moment Zoe took the picture, Noah's phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. Back at the hotel, when Zoe excused herself to the gift store in the lobby, Noah checked the message. It was the same unknown number. "Ask her who she used to be. You deserve to know the truth." Cold sweat protruded from Noah's forehead. Who she used to be? What did that mean? Did Zoe have someone before him? But it wasn't a secret. They'd discussed their past relationship. What then? He typed a reply, "Who are you? What do you want?" But then erased it. It was unclear who was behind these messages, and entering into a dialogue might not be a good idea. The rest of the evening passed in a tense atmosphere. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, but Noah was distracted and taciturn. "Why don't you share what's bothering you?" Zoe finally asked as they headed back to the room. Noah stopped in the hallway and looked at her. For a moment he wanted to show her the strange messages, to ask her directly if there was something she hadn't told him, but seeing her genuine concern, he changed his mind. "Just tired from the experience," he replied. "Let's go to bed early tonight, okay?" Zoe nodded, but there was doubt in her eyes. On the 5th day of their stay in Bar Harbor, Noah received another message. "She's been lying to you from the beginning. You have no idea how deep her lies go." By this point, Noah's concern had turned into real anxiety. He began to analyze his acquaintance with Zoe, their relationship, looking for any signs of deception. They met at a charity event at the hospital where Zoe worked. She was quiet, a little reserved, but sincere and kind. There was nothing to indicate any secrets. Zoe also noticed a change in her husband's behavior. He had become more withdrawn, checking his phone often and sometimes looking at her with strange, scrutinizing glances. "Noah," she said on the evening of the 6th day, as they sat on the balcony of the suite, watching the stars. "I think something's wrong. It's like you're pulling away from me." Noah sighed. He didn't want to ruin their honeymoon, but the tension was becoming unbearable. "It's just," he stammered, choosing his words. "I've gotten some strange messages." "What kind of messages?" Zoe tensed. Noah pulled out his phone and showed her the latest message. Zoe read it, and Noah saw her go pale. "What nonsense," she said finally, trying to keep her voice calm. "Someone's playing a prank on us or ruining our honeymoon." "Yeah, I guess so," Noah agreed uncertainly. "But why the innuendo? Zoe, is there something you haven't told me?" Their eyes met. Zoe's eyes flashed with concern, but she quickly got over it. "Noah, you know me. We've been together for 2 years. If I had some terrible secrets, would I be able to hide them for so long?" It was a reasonable argument, and Noah felt a prick of shame at his suspicions. "You're right," he said, taking her hand. "I'm sorry. It's just that these messages, they've thrown me off my game." Zoe smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Let's just forget about it. Let's not let some anonymous malcontent ruin our honeymoon. They spent the night making love, as if trying through physical intimacy to recapture the soul connection that had begun to elude them. But even in his wife's arms, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. On the 7th day of their stay in Bar Harbor, Noah woke up before Zoe. He quietly climbed out of bed and walked out onto the balcony. The morning mist shrouded the shore, giving the landscape a mystical look. Noah took a deep breath of the cool air, trying to get his thoughts in order. Their honeymoon was coming to an end. Tomorrow they were to return home to Portland and start a normal family life. Should they let some anonymous messages mar their happiness? The phone in his hand vibrated. A new message from the same number. Ask her about the surgical scars. Noah froze. Surgical scars? Zoe did indeed have small scars on her chest and lower abdomen. She explained that she had undergone surgery to remove benign tumors a few years ago. Was that a lie? When Zoe woke up, Noah had already had time to shower and order breakfast for the room. He tried to act normal, but anxiety was building inside him. The last day of our honeymoon, Zoe said, stretching in bed. How should we spend it? Why don't we just walk around the city without a plan? Noah suggested. Go to the places we liked, say goodbye to them. Zoe nodded in agreement. That sounded wonderful. The afternoon passed in leisurely strolls through the streets of Bar Harbor. They visited a little bakery that served the best blueberry muffins in town, browsed the souvenir shops for a few memorable trinkets, and sat on the waterfront for a long time, watching the fishing boats. But all the while, Noah couldn't get rid of the intrusive thoughts. He furtively watched his wife, trying to see something in her that would confirm or deny the anonymous hints. What are you thinking about? Zoe asked him as they sat in the cafe, sipping hot chocolate. About us, Noah answered honestly. About our future. And how do you see it? She said, a note of worry in her voice. Noah looked into her eyes. Happy, he said at last. I see us happy, Zoe. She smiled in relief and squeezed his hand. Me too, Noah. Me too. That evening, as they were packing their things in preparation for tomorrow's departure, Noah's phone beeped again. He glanced at the screen and felt his heart skip a beat. If you want to know the truth about your wife, meet me when you get back to Portland. I'll be waiting for you at the Sea Breeze Cafe by the waterfront at 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Noah quickly put the phone away before Zoe could see it. The decision had been made. He would go to this meeting. Whatever the outcome, the unknown was worse. Their last night in Bar Harbor passed in tense silence. They lay side by side, pretending to sleep, but both were immersed in their own thoughts. Zoe worried about what she knew, and Noah worried about what he didn't know. In the morning, they turned in their room keys and loaded their luggage into the rental car. The drive home was a long one, about 4 hours along the scenic coast of Maine. Ready to get back to reality? Noah asked, starting the engine. Zoe looked at him with a slight sadness. Can't I stay here forever? Unfortunately, no, Noah smiled. But the smile did not affect his eyes. Work, home, ordinary life awaits us. Zoe sighed and leaned back in the seat. Let's go home then. The car pulled away, leaving behind the small coastal town that had witnessed their honeymoon happy and anxious at the same time. Ahead was Portland and the unknown, which frightened them both for different reasons. Portland greeted the newlyweds with gray, cloud-covered skies and drizzling rain. After the bright sunshine of Bar Harbor, the weather seemed especially dreary, as if portending bad things to come. Noah parked the car outside their small house in the suburbs and looked at Zoe. Here we are, he said, trying to keep his voice upbeat. Zoe nodded, looking at the raindrops dripping down the windshield. Yeah, she said quietly. It was like they'd never left. They brought the luggage into the house, and Zoe began to sort through the luggage while Noah checked the mail that had accumulated during their absence. The usual household chores should have brought back a sense of normalcy, but the tension between them hadn't disappeared. Later, when Zoe went to the bathroom, Noah pulled out his phone and reread the last message from an unknown sender. Sea Breeze Cafe, 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. He remembered the place, a small coffee shop by the waterfront, where he and Zoe had been a few times. Should he go or not? Part of him wanted to just delete all the messages and forget about them, go back to his happy life with his wife. but the other part demanded the truth, whatever it was. "I'm going to be late at the machine shop tomorrow," he said when Zoe came out of the bathroom. "A lot of work has piled up while I've been away." "Sure," Zoe smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. "I'm going to go to work too. The head nurse called me, asking me to fill in for someone." Noah nodded and they continued unpacking, talking about extraneous trivia, avoiding deep topics and reminders of strange messages. The night passed restlessly. They lay side by side, pretending to sleep, but in fact they both stayed awake until dawn. In the morning, they went about their business, Zoe to the hospital, Noah to the auto shop. The day dragged agonizingly slow. Noah kept looking at his watch, waiting for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Finally, he told his co-workers that he had some personal business to attend to and headed toward the waterfront. The Seabreeze Cafe was nearly empty at this time of day. Noah chose a table by the window, where he had a good view of the entrance, and ordered a coffee. At exactly 3 o'clock, the door opened and she walked in, a woman he vaguely remembered from his wedding. Then she had seemed to him just one of the many guests, a face in the crowd. Now she was heading straight for his table, confident and determined. "Noah Smith?" she said, stopping in front of him. "Yes," he answered, pointing to the chair opposite. "And you must be—" "Tamara Woods." She sat down and placed her bag on the table. "Thank you for coming." Noah regarded her carefully. A young black woman with short hair and shrewd eyes, dressed simply but tastefully, jeans, white blouse, leather jacket. "Were you the one who sent me the messages?" he asked directly. "Yes." Tamara didn't deny it. "I wanted you to know the truth about your wife." "And what was that truth?" Noah tried to speak calmly, though his heart was pounding like crazy. Tamara opened the bag and took out an envelope. "Before I show you this, I want you to understand that I'm not doing this out of revenge. Maybe some of it is, but the important thing is that you deserve to know who you married." She held out the envelope to Noah. He took it with trembling hands and slowly opened it. Inside were photographs, old, slightly faded pictures. The first one had a young black man smiling at the camera. Something in his features seemed familiar. Noah turned the photo over and saw the caption on the back. "David, 22 years old." He looked at the next picture. The same man, now with Tamara. They were hugging in front of some lake. "I don't understand," Noah said, raising his eyes to Tamara. "Who is this man?" "It's David Carter," Tamara answered, and her voice trembled. "Or, as you know her, Zoe Carter." Noah felt the blood rush from his face. He looked at the photograph again, more carefully now. The eyes, yes, those eyes he'd recognize anywhere. His wife's eyes. "That's impossible," he whispered. "It's quite possible." Tamara pulled out several more photographs. "Look, here's David at 25. And here's a newspaper clipping of him receiving an award as a promising nurse. And here's the last photo I have of him. He's 27. A few months after that, he disappeared from my life, saying he was going to Europe to study. I didn't hear from him for a few years until I happened to see Zoe in the hospital a year ago. I recognized those eyes immediately." Noah stared at the pictures, unable to believe what he was seeing, but also unable to find any other explanation. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes, the same smile, the same distinctive hand movements he'd noticed in one of the pictures. "We were engaged," Tamara continued, and there was bitterness in her voice now. "I loved him. We were planning a wedding, and then he just disappeared. All I have left is a goodbye letter and the ring I gave him." She pulled a small velvet box from her pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple silver ring engraved, "Forever yours, T." "But why?" he asked, trying to make sense of what he'd heard. "Why would she done this?" Tamara shrugged. "David had always been different, sensitive, not like other guys. But that's just the way I loved him. I didn't know he felt out of place in his body. He never told me about it. Just ran away and then completely changed his life." She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not judging his desire to be a woman. Everyone has the right to be who they feel inside. But what he did to me is unforgivable. He should have told me the truth instead of disappearing, leaving me in ignorance and pain for years to come." Noah sat stunned by these revelations. His wife, his Zoe, Used to be a man named David Carter, a man who had left his fiancée to start a new life in a new body, and she'd never told him that. "I have to go," he said, getting up from the table. "What are you going to do?" Tamara asked. "I don't know," Noah answered honestly. "But I have to talk to her." Tamara nodded and gathered the pictures back into the envelope. "They're yours," she said, holding the envelope out to Noah. "I made copies." He took the envelope without saying a word and headed for the exit. At the door, he stopped and turned around. "Why now?" he asked. "Why not before?" Tamara looked him in the eye. "I saw you together a few times before the wedding. You looked happy. I didn't want to ruin that. But then I saw your wedding announcement in the paper and realized I couldn't let you live a lie. You had to know the truth before you tied your life to a man who was capable of such deception." Noah nodded and walked out of the cafe. It was starting to rain outside, but he didn't notice it. His mind was spinning with scraps of thoughts, memories, conversations with Zoe. The little oddities he'd written off as her character now took on a whole different meaning. He got into the car and just sat there for a few minutes, staring at himself. Then he started the engine and drove home. On the way, he stopped at a store and bought a bottle of whiskey. Alcohol was never a solution to problems, but right now, Noah needed something to dull the pain and help him gather his thoughts. At home, he pulled the gun he kept for self-defense out of the safe. He'd never thought he could use it against anyone, much less his wife. But right now, the gun gave him a strange sense of control over a situation that was completely out of control. Noah poured himself a whiskey and sat in the living room chair, placing the gun and the envelope of photographs on the coffee table in front of him. Now all that was left to do was wait. Zoe came home around 7 o'clock in the evening. She walked in, slightly drenched from the rain, and froze in the living room doorway when she saw Noah. "What's going on?" she asked, noticing the bottle of whiskey and the tense expression on his face. Noah silently pointed to the envelope. "Look at it," he said. Zoe walked slowly to the table and took the envelope. When she opened it and saw the first picture, she turned pale. Her hands trembled and she struggled to hold the pictures. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "Tamara Woods," Noah replied, watching her reaction. "Your ex-fiancé, or more accurately, David Carter's fiancé." Zoe slumped to the couch, the photos falling out of her hands and scattering to the floor. "Noah, I can explain," she began. "Explain what?" His voice was frighteningly calm. "That you've been lying to me all this time? That you used to be a man? That you ran away from the woman who loved you without telling her the truth?" "I was going to tell you." Zoe looked at him pleadingly. "I really was, but I was afraid of your reaction. You've always been so negative about trans people." "Because it's unnatural," Noah raised his voice. "If God made you a man, then that's what you should have been." "It's not that simple." Tears streamed down Zoe's cheeks. "I've always felt like a woman inside. All my life I lived in someone else's body, suffering, hating myself." "What about Tamara?" Noah asked. "She suffered too when you left her without explanation." Zoe lowered her head. "I know what I did to her was wrong. I was young and scared. I didn't know how to tell her the truth, afraid of her reaction, of judgment. Like I am to you now, aren't I?" Noah grinned bitterly. "Noah, please," Zoe reached out to him. "This doesn't change who I am inside. I'm still the same woman you fell in love with, the one who loves you." Noah shook his head. "No," he said. "I fell in love with a woman who never existed, an illusion, a lie." He took the gun from the table. Zoe recoiled in horror. "What are you doing?" "I want to hear it from you," Noah said, pointing the gun at his wife. "The whole truth, right now." Zoe looked at the gun, then at her husband. In his eyes, she saw pain, anger, and something else, fear. Fear that his world was falling apart, that everything he believed in was a lie. "Yes," she said quietly. "I used to be a man. My name was David Carter. I was born in a man's body, but I always felt like a woman. It's called gender dysphoria. It's not a choice, Noah. It's something I was born with." Noah listened without interrupting, but his gun hand didn't waver. "I started hormone therapy when I was 27, Zoe continued. "Before that, I cut all ties to my past, including Tamara. I know I was cruel to her, but I couldn't have done anything differently at the time. I was a broken person who desperately needed a chance to start over. When did you have the surgery? Noah asked, and his voice trembled. At 28, Zoe replied. It had been multiple surgeries, not just one surgery. The recovery took over a year. Noah remembered the scars on her body, which she'd explained quite differently. Another lie in an endless chain of lies. Why didn't you tell me the truth when we first started dating? He asked. Because I was afraid of losing you, Zoe answered honestly. I knew how you felt about these things. You often talked about how you hated the whole modern agenda, as you called it. How you thought there were only two sexes, and that everyone should stay who they were born to be. I was a coward, Noah. I was afraid that if I told you the truth, you'd leave, and I loved you so much. Loved you? Noah let his anger get the better of him. If you loved me, you wouldn't have lied to me every day of our life together. You wouldn't have let me marry a man I don't even know. You know me? Zoe looked at him pleadingly. You know the real me. My soul, my character, my feelings. It's all real, Noah. Only my body has changed to fit who I've always felt I was. Noah shook his head. He wouldn't accept that explanation. To him, the world was simple and clear. There were men and women, and no one could change what God had endowed him with at birth. Anything else is a perversion, a sin contrary to nature itself. You deceived me, he said, his voice full of icy rage. You let me fall in love with a fake, a counterfeit. You knew I would never accept you if I knew the truth, and you still came into my life, into my home, into my bed. Noah, please put the gun down. Zoe took a step toward him. Let's talk calmly. I know this is a shock to you, but we can get through this together. Together? Noah laughed, but there was no mirth in his laugh, only pain and despair. Do you really think that after all this we can be together? That I could look at you and not see the man you were? I've never been the man on the inside, Zoe said quietly. Only on the outside. I've always been a woman on the inside. Noah shook his head. You're a sick man, he said, and you've made me an accessory to your sickness, your sin. He rose from his chair, still keeping the gun pointed at Zoe. Noah, what are you doing? Fear came into her voice. What I have to, he replied. Fixing a mistake. Zoe backed away from the wall, seeing in his eyes what she feared most, total rejection, disgust, hatred. Please, she whispered, I love you. And I loved a woman who never existed, Noah replied, and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out in the silence of the house, followed by another and another. Zoe fell to the floor, her white blouse stained red. She stared at Noah with wide-open eyes that held surprise and pain, and then the life slowly left them. Noah stood over his wife's body, holding the gun in his trembling hand. Only now, when it was too late, did he begin to realize what he had done. He hadn't just killed the man who had lied to him. He had destroyed a part of himself, a part of his life, a part of his soul. He knelt down next to Zoe, still clutching the gun. Tears streamed down his face, dripping onto the breathless body of the woman he loved and hated at the same time. The woman he had just taken his life because of his inability to accept the truth. Noah looked at the gun in his hand. It would have been so easy to bring it to his temple and pull the trigger one more time, sparing himself the inevitable judgment. But he couldn't do that. He had to answer for his act, for his anger, for his intolerance. He put the gun on the floor and sat down, leaning his back against the wall, next to his wife's body. The sirens were getting closer. The neighbors had already managed to call the police when they heard the gunfire. Soon it would all be over. His life with Zoe, his freedom, his future, it all ended the moment he pulled the trigger.